Tech by Tips.
Hello and welcome to another Tech by Tips video. In today's video, we're going to be covering an application that I found that is very useful, especially if you're running Docker containers. It could be either in a Synology NAS or maybe on your own machine or some other server. And this is going to make the process quite easy for you to maintain your containers updated. So we're going to be talking about the application named Watchtower. And this application is a process basically to automate making updates to your Docker images. So it updates the containers that you're running to always have the latest version of the image that it's using. And you can find it in GitHub at container/watchtower. So container has 3 R's at the end, and Watchtower is the name of the application. And as you can see here, they have a URL for their documentation and all that stuff. You can find it at container.dev/watchtower. That takes you to this website here that has a lot of good information about the application, what it does, how to set it up, etc. This application has been released about 40 times now. It's pretty stable, I would say. It's already version 1.7.1 and it has 140 contributors, so that's always good. Having a good amount of people contributing to the project makes it better. It's written mainly in Go with a little bit of shell. And if we go down here, we can see that this application update the running version of your applications by pushing a new image to Docker Hub or your own image registry, if that's the case. And it'll also be able to pull down your new image. Then once it gets the latest version of that image, it can gracefully shut down your existing container and restart it working the same way that it was working before, but running the latest version of the image. So that's great. It means that your containers will automatically update themselves, and as long as you're holding all your configuration files somewhere, like in our case in the Synology NAS, then the containers will spin up and it'll be like nothing happened. And they say that mainly this is intended to be using, home labs, media centers, and stuff like that. They don't recommend it for production like in a company or anything like that, but I think it's very useful for regular people, so let's cover that. And it says that you should be using Kubernetes if that's the case, for example, if you're running production. And they're talking about several options that you have, like micro, Kubernetes, or K3s. The documentation again is pointing to that website that I mentioned before, and here we have a list of all the contributors, and that's really lovely to see. So now we're going to be deploying this, and in my case, in my lab, if you come here, you'll see that I have a bunch of images, and all of them basically, or almost all of them, have run old. I see the option here that says update available, and the Synology NAS does not give me an option where I can tell it, whenever you see an update, automatically update. So that's why we need this sort of container. We can see a bunch of containers that need updating, and we're gonna run the application and test that it works properly. So let's do that. Okay, the first thing here is we need to go into the file station again. We go into the Docker projects and we create a new project here for Watchtower. And that's where we're going to put the Docker compose file. And as far as I know, this application does not require any storage of anything in the system, so we don't have to do anything here in the configs, which is where I usually put all the container related stuff. And now that we have that project there, we can go into the container manager, go into projects, and we can create a new project called Watchtower. We're going to look for that folder in the Docker projects that I created, and I'm gonna say that I'm gonna create a Docker compose file. And in here we actually have two options where how we can run this. The first way that you can run this is telling Watchtower to update all of the containers that you have running, unless you put in the configuration of that container, like in that YAML file that deploys that container from a project, a label that tells it do not update this using Watchtower. The second way that you can do this, instead of telling it to update everything, you can pass it a list of all the containers that you want it to update. So that's the second way. I'm gonna put that there, but I'm not gonna be using that honestly. I'm just gonna say update everything in this example. So what we're going to do for that is we're going to get a code that looks like this, and let me make a note here. update every running container. So this is the first way of running. So let me put mode 1. And then in here, we are defining the Watchtower container. And for that container, we're going to be using the latest image from Docker Hub, as you can see here. And I'm going to name this container Watchtower. And in here, I'm going to put my time zone. In my case, it's America, New York. And I'm going to go over these in a bit because those are things that we have to specify. So these are the environment variables. And then in here, we're not going to mount a volume per se, so no folder that contains any storage. What we're going to do here is we're going to pass the Docker socket to the container so that it can manage Docker inside the NAS, because this needs to execute commands against Docker, and that's why we have this here. And we're going to say restart unless we stop this. So now let me also put another here that all of this is going to be commented out, but I just want you to have it in case you want to try it that way. Update named running containers. Okay, so that's going to be the second part. We're going to put the code for that here. And I'm going to comment all of this out because it's going to give me issues. All right, so I have commented all that out and also added, this is a piece of code that you need to put on the project of a container that you don't want Watchtower to update. So this is the part that you have to put on the project for that container. Okay, here will be the second mode of working, which is where you define the containers that you want to update instead of trying to update all of them. So now we're going to cover here what are these environment variables. The first one, as you know, is the time zone, so that the container knows on which time zone it is running. Then down here, when we have Watchtower cleanup equals true, that is that we're telling Watchtower that we want to clean up the old Docker images. So if we update an image, we want to get rid of all the old versions of that image. So keep only the latest one. Because if you don't do this, then it's going to, keep on piling up different hashes of the image, and then it's going to take a lot of space. So that's the point of this. And the other one that says Watchtower include stopped, that tells Watchtower that you also want to update any container that is not currently running. It is going to update containers that are stopped and containers that are running. If you set this to false, then it's only going to update the containers that are actively running. So that's important to know. Then here where it says Watchtower revive stopped, that tells Watchtower that if a container that is stopped is updated, do you want it to start up after the update, yes or no? So if you set this to true, it'll turn on those containers that were turned off. If you set it to false, it's just going to leave them stopped. And here in the schedule is how we specify how often we want it to look for updates. In this case, I have the cron time that it's saying that I want it to look for updates every day at 2 in the morning. So you can use any other timing that you want, but in my case, that's more than enough. 2 in the morning, I'm usually sleeping, so it's perfect for it to try to do that. It won't affect me while I'm, doing things. So this is how you would set it up if you want it at 2 in the morning. And that's basically it for setting it up to run, to try to update every running container. Now, I said that there was a second version for that. So that's what I have in here that is commented out. Let me save this because there's a little bit, the space is not big enough. And then we can kind of see all of this better. So next, don't start, done. And then we look for Watchtower here. Watchtower YAML. All right, it's more space to read. So now on the second mode of operation, you're telling the Watchtower container that you want to specify the containers that you want to update in this case. So we would put under the command option here the names of the containers that you want to auto update. So that's the main difference here. Instead of having that being done trying all of the containers, then you only do it for all those that you specify in here. So that's up to you, however you want to do it. I honestly prefer it the way that it tries to update everything. The rest is just the same. So the environment variables will be exactly the same. So let me just put it for an example, and then the rest is the same. So that's how you do it if you want to do it this way. Again, if you're trying to update every single container and you find that there's one specific container that you don't want to update, then you put this in the project that created that container, and then it'll just ignore this one because you're putting a label saying to Watchtower, this container, ignore it. And that's all that we need here in order for us to start Watchtower. And we have configured it to do it every day at 2 in the morning. And I wanted to include even the stopped containers, but I don't want them to start automatically after they have been updated. So now we can save this and we can even build it. So I'm going to be back when this is done. All right, it took a couple of minutes and we can see that it was successful. We can clear this here. And exit code 0 means it's good. And remember, when we were looking at the images here, we had, a good amount of images that needed to be updated. Now we also have the Watchtower image. And that's another important thing to point out here. Watchtower updates itself also, so you don't have to worry about the Watchtower container going old. It updates everything. So now we can go into the container basically and see the logs to see if we see anything here. And that's basically it. It says that the container, it's using version 171. No notifications are set up. Checking all the containers except explicitly disabled with the label, you see. And then it says it's going to run the first time tomorrow at 2 in the morning. So right now we're not going to see that it's going to do anything. So it says, note that the first check will be performed in 9 hours, 22 minutes, and 51 seconds. So it's going to wait until we hit 2 in the morning, and then it's going to do the update of the images. And that's it. Honestly, we don't have to do anything else. Watchtower is going to look for all the images that we have here. I've configured it in a way so that even if the container is not running, it's going to update the image, and then it's just not going to trigger the container to run again if it was stopped. If it was running, then it'll gracefully shut it down, update the image, and then run it back up again. So we no longer have to worry about having to come here into the images and click update and wait for it to happen. So it'll do it itself and it's going to be okay. We might see some messages here in the notifications saying, for example, a container has stopped unexpectedly, like if it's an error, but it's actually not an error. It's when Watchtower stops a container, since this, Watchtower is working on its own. It's not part of the Synology user interface. The Synology interface kind of freaks out and gives us that error, but it's not an error. It was because Watchtower did it. And that's basically it. That's how you get Watchtower running. You just set it and forget it, and it'll make sure that all of your images get updated on the schedule. I hope you liked this video. If you did, hit the like button. If you have not subscribed to the channel, also subscribe to the channel. It helps us grow, focus on the channel. Hopefully we get to a point where we can get sponsorship so I don't have to go the way of monetizing the channel to, make some money out of this. Also on that I just said, I am not monetizing the channel, and that is on purpose. I don't want it to be bombarding you with ads. So I rely entirely on your support. So if you like the content and you find it useful, feel free to donate using the link in the description below. I also have a link to my Bitcoin wallet. If you want to be able to donate using Bitcoin, I'll really appreciate it. And that's going to be it for this video. I'll see you in the next one.